Recession, recession, recession. That's the drumbeat of the news these days.
Are we heading towards a global recession?
So is a recession on its way?
Flash red alarm signals.
I think eventually we will have a recession.
Today is the 5th of September, 2019, and many of the news stories and news reports on television are predicting a recession. The recession's right around the corner. There's no real effects of it on the ground. Unemployment is still low, consumer confidence is high, but the consensus among the pundits and the economists is a recession is going to happen. They argue about when it's going to happen, but it's going to happen. And historically, this isn't too unusual. In America, a recession happens about once every 8 years. And it's been 10 years since the global financial crisis, so it's reasonable to expect that a recession will happen again. So what's the news here? Well, I have my own demographic doom take on it. And my take is that this is going to be far worse recession than any in the past. And there are three reasons for this. One is debt, the huge amount of debt that the world has, unprecedented amount of debt, and demography, the way our populations are leveling out and not growing anymore. And finally, there's the depletion of weaponry, that central banks don't have as many tools at their disposal to deal with a future recession. The interest rates are already low, so they can't lower them much further. So these three things are going to gang up on the world economy and assure that this recession is worse than any other. In fact, this may be a permanent recession that goes on forever. The only way to get out of this recession is to neutralize the debt that is being held around the world that can never be paid off. And that's a long and very painful process. Bananas. Would you like a banana? So, let's talk about those three things. Debt. Well, a very reputable organization called the International Institute for Finance, or something close to that, calculates that there's that the debt of the world at large, that is all forms of debt, government debt, corporate debt, individual debt, add up to 325% of GDP. What that says to me is that it is impossible for the world to pay off that debt. It's just not going to happen. It's like you having an income of $10,000 but owing over $30,000 and spending more money, spending $12,000 every year. You're never going to be able to pay off that debt. So what's going to happen to that 325% of debt of the world? It has to go away in some way. Otherwise, it's going to crash. The whole economy has to crash in some way to get rid of that debt. So when it happens, we talk about the U.S. government debt. U.S. government debt is now exceeding, it's about 21 or 22 trillion dollars, where the entire business of the country is only $20 trillion. And we're adding 1 trillion every year to that. Ducks. Hey. Sure. Let me set this aside. All right.
It was stand like in this side of it.
Okay. All right, that's nice. That's nice. So let me get a couple shots. And then let me get a close-up. And actually, you want me to take a video too. You need to have a video. One. This video you can move around. All right, there you go. Okay. So where was I? So think about the government debt of the United States, $22 trillion. It's increasing by $1 trillion every year. The total business of the country is only $20 trillion a year. And when a recession comes, by definition, that business is going to fall away. There's going to be less. There's going to be 19 or 18, while we're still piling on the debt. So sooner or later, that has to break in some way. I can't tell you how it's going to break, but it has to break. And I assume it's going to break in the next recession. In dark times, people pile onto government debt because they believe, for example, the United States government is a secure investment, that the United States government can never default on its debt. So people are piling into US government debt. It's driving the yield or the interest rate down to close to zero. So you're buying government debt, you're not getting any interest, and you're taking a risk because you're taking the risk that the government won't be able to pay back that debt. So people brush this off right now. They don't believe it's real. They don't believe the threat is real. They're getting out of stocks because a recession is coming, and they're going into government bonds because they think they're safe. Well, what if they're not safe? So this isn't my specialty. I could go on about this, but debt is not my specialty. Demographics are my specialty. And there's a demographic element to the next recession, in that we don't have the population growth that we used to have. The glory times for the US economy were the 1990s, the last quarter of the 20th century was the garden time, was the golden period for the US economy, because you had a growing population, and a growing population meant you had to build things, build new housing tracts, build new restaurants, new shopping malls. All of that happened in the last quarter of the 20th century, largely as a result of the baby boom back in the 1950s and early 60s. So back between 1946 and 1964, Americans had a lot of babies. And although the baby boom ended in the mid-60s and birth rates came down, those baby boomers are still alive. And they powered huge economic activity in the last quarter of the 20th century. Unfortunately, that engine of growth is running out. It's losing steam because the baby boomers are now retiring. As of 2011, the first of the baby boomers retired. And when you retire, you stop paying taxes. You start drawing on government services without paying any taxes. You stop buying as many things because you're actually downsizing your life rather than expanding it. So when that happens, 2011, that was a watershed moment when demographically things started going bad. So that's what makes this recession different from all the other recessions, as we still had a growing population in the 1990s, and even up until even in 2008, we still had a growing population. We still had plenty of consumers to power the economy. As of now, we have a lot fewer consumers. We have a lot more government expense for the baby boomers, and with no end in sight, no end of demographic sight. Fertility has fallen off the edge of a cliff in all the developed countries. Virtually none of the developed countries are producing enough babies to sustain their population. So there's no hope of population growth coming along to save the economy. At the same time, of course, debt is out of control. Government debt is out of control. There's no way for it to be paid off, so things have to crash. I can't tell you exactly how things are going to crash or what the trigger will be. Lots of people are going to blame Donald Trump for starting a trade war with China,
which could spell economic disaster for America eventually, meaning a recession. is all Donald Trump's fault. No one else has any responsibility for the creation of the potential disaster that could be coming our way, thanks entirely to the Trump tariffs and the Trump trade war.
And Donald Trump, at this point, with more than a year left in his presidency, he very well could trigger the next recession. But the recession is not his fault. These conditions have been building up since 2008. And the third element of this that makes this recession probably worse than any other is what I call depletion of weaponry. Central banks no longer have the tools they need to fight a recession because they blew them all in 2008 and recently by lowering interest rates when the economy was good. So as of today, the interest rates on government bonds is down around 2.5%, which is historically very low. The U.S. government can't lower rates practically any lower than zero, although there's lots of talk of that, lots of governments trying to do that. There is no, what the governments do, what central banks do in times of recession is they lower rates and they pump a lot of cash into the economy by buying securities. And this juices the economy. It's called a sugar high to the economy. That's how they got us out of the 2008 recession, is they juiced the economy with lower rates and lots of cash. What that did essentially is pump up the value. It didn't cause inflation as it was expected, but it did cause asset inflation. It didn't cause consumer inflation, but it caused asset inflation where people had lots of money at low rates. They used it to pump up the value of stocks and other assets. So all of that has to come crashing down. It's going to happen in a big way, and I believe it's not going to end. This recession, there might be a temporary recession this year that goes away for a couple of years and then comes back, but eventually you have to have the big one. You have to have the big thing that destroys everything. And what I mean by everything is all of this unpayable debt has to go away, has to vanish and somehow for the economy to be able to move forward. So if the government owes way more than it can pay, somehow that debt has to be forgiven or default, or in some way it has to go away for the economy to start rolling again. And that could take years, if not decades, for that to happen. And in the process, governments could fall, institutions will go away, lots of bad things are going to happen. And that's my prediction. That's my demographic. That is the principal demographic doom that we are facing right now. That there's going to be this huge crash, absolutely massive crash, where we realize just how badly off we are and just how bad the debt situation is, and we don't dig ourselves out of it for decades. When we do dig ourselves out of it, it's a whole new world. It's a whole different society. And that's really what I'm preparing for. What is that different society going to be like? It doesn't do me much good to predict doom and gloom. There's plenty of doomsayers in the economy right now. Plenty of people saying this recession will be huge. That doesn't mean I can do anything about it or that my predictions help anybody. But I can think about what the future is going to bring. And that's why I'm trying to redesign the human family. Trying to come up with new ways to bring our population back, new ways to have a sustainable economy, and that's what I'm working on. So where am I? That's all I have to say about the economy. Where am I? I am at the koi pond. The fish are hungry and I need to do something about it. This is fish food. Let's see if I got a quarter here I can splurge on them. Get my quarter out. See if they want to eat. All right, okay, got to do this carefully. Oh, there we are. Good amount of food. There we go. There they are. Everyone's waiting. They're ready. They're ready. So let's get out. Let's get down close. All right. There we go. Koi pond. Here. Time to eat. Dinner time. Go crazy. All gone. All right.